Hi, and I'm going to begin with a bow. So welcome here to Unit 7 this semester. Sorry I missed doing a video last week. It didn't work out. And glad to be here with you again. One thing I want to say is that I'm almost done reading and commenting on the reviews, and just have a couple left. I really appreciate the work that you put into these reviews and the breadth of pieces that you brought together. There were not only academic books and pretty dense conceptual articles, but also poems and movies and videos and music. So that's really what I was hoping for with these reviews. Be sure that if you did just be sure that you do one of your reviews as a substantial academic work, either a solid article or a book. And then the other one, of course, you're free to do whichever. So if you did a poem or a piece of music this time, then I'll look forward to that substantial piece next time. And if you did your substantial work this time for your first review, then see what else you can find and dig up. I use these my comments on the reviews to really emphasize some of the central key points of the course. What is a ritual? What is a rite of passage in particular? What are the differences between rites of passage and other kinds of ceremonies, rituals of healing or connection or integration? And which phases of transitions are being looked at? Some of the works I found were primarily about severance. Some were primarily about the threshold phase or liminality. So any given work doesn't need to necessarily cover all three phases of a life transition or a rite of passage. It's right that many reviews, many commentaries on rites of passage and life transitions will focus on one or another of these phases. In fact, it would be unusual that most works cover all three phases. That's a level of integration and completeness that we find sometimes, but not always. So I do appreciate the work that you've done here. Really triggered a lot of thoughts for me, and so I hope you will go back and look again at the reviews and the commentary on the reviews, because I'm using these, like I said, to highlight some of the points that we are making in the course that we've made so far. Now, Unit 7, we continue in our exploration of the threshold phase, of liminality. So this past week in Unit 6, we looked at space and the openness that naturally comes when we step away from our familiar identity, when we sever from the familiar life, the familiar self, our self-concepts, often from our friends, our communities, our just way of being in the world. This is what it means to have a transformative rite of passage, a transformative transition. There is a fundamental leaving behind how we've known ourselves and how we are in the world, which opens up space. Now, in this unit, we're going to look at a different quality of the threshold, a different task, which is how to be with the, let's call it ego annihilation of the threshold phase. Now, Maybe more technically, more accurately, we should call it a degree of ego annihilation. It's hardly ever complete. A complete annihilation of the ego, of the familiar sense of self that's developed by integrating past experiences and messages about ourselves. That would be the ego. That constellation of all those old messages and all the traces of our personal history that we take to be ourselves. Everything that goes into constructing this familiar ego identity. And to some degree, in the threshold phase, in liminality, that ego identity begins to dissolve, or fall apart, or evaporate, or crack open. And so we really want to look this week at that process of ego annihilation. What does that mean? That's the challenge of this phase. And, as we've looked at before, there is a particular ally that arises from our inner depth, our inner nature. It's inherent in us. And this week, it has to do with stillness, with quiet, and with a kind of power. The power of presence. The power to be here without the wrappings and trappings of our ego identities. How to simply be. The power to simply be. And that is the ally that we need in order to open up to work with, to deal with, and to move on through the loss of our familiar ego identity. So that's what we'll be looking at. Also, here, I wanted to bring in the concept of the dark night of the soul. And I just want to highlight a distinction that is there in the study materials. These days, a lot of times we use dark night of the soul to refer to a really difficult time. And that makes sense. And in a lot of ways, this threshold phase is a difficult time. We feel bereft, we feel despairing, we feel lost, we feel abandoned. And so in that sense, it is this sort of common usage of the concept of a dark night of the soul. However, when St. John of the Cross initially wrote about his dark night of the soul, described the dark night of the soul, it meant not really such a difficult time, but more of an intimate time. A time when all the ego agitation and the noise of the world, all the flashing lights and buzzing and beeping of the world has stilled, has gone quiet. And in that stillness, there is such a potent intimacy with our true nature, with the divine, with reality. So this is another, and I would say deeper and even more accurate meaning of the concept of a dark night of the soul. The intimacy with our own hearts, the openness of our hearts that comes in this place of stillness. This is the possibility of the threshold phase. One more thought, a reminder that next week, March 7th, is Community Practice Day at Naropa. And I will post some description of Community Practice Day. You know this already if you've been around Naropa for more than just this semester. We do it every semester. Community Practice Day is a chance for us to come together and practice. So it's Tuesday, March 7th this semester, and I hope you will be able to set aside at least an hour, a couple hours, if not a whole day, in order to practice. And as you're practicing on this day, remember that you are part of a community, that there are others doing their community practice at this very same time, on this day, that you are part of the Naropa community, an extended community that goes beyond just this class or your academic program. So that's the community dimension of Community Practice Day. And even if you're doing it on your own, as most of us will be here in this distance learning platform, know that you're still connected. So I look forward to seeing you online this week, and I'm going to bow. See you online. Bye for now.